Welcome back to the Rich Life Diaries. In today's episode, it's going to be a bit of a spicy one and it might piss you off a little bit, and that's okay because that's kind of the point. I'm basically all about challenging the way that we think. And today I want to challenge something that most people never stop to question: the life script. The one that gets handed to you before you're even old enough to have an opinion about anything. Get married, have kids, and get a mortgage. The three things that are sold to us as the formula for a happy, successful life. The three things I'm going to argue today might actually be the biggest lies you were ever told. So let's get into it. Welcome to Rich Life Diaries, the podcast where we talk real strategies for creating abundance, building a business you love, and designing a life that actually feels good. If you're done playing small and ready to create your dream life, you're in the right place. So here's what will probably sound really familiar to you as a human being. You leave school and everyone asks, what are you going to do with your life? And then you get a job and then everyone asks you, when are you going to get married? And then you get married and then everyone asks you, when are you going to have some kids? And then you have kids and then everyone asks you, are you going to upgrade or buy that house you've been looking at? Nobody stops to ask if any of these things actually make people happy. And that is exactly what this episode is about today. So the first myth we get told is to get married. It's funny how the older generation only seem to care about this one question. Like the highest level you can reach in life is getting married, someone choosing you. Literally every time I see my grandmother, which is my nan, she's now 94, it's the first question she asks me. You got a boyfriend yet, Sammy? She has never asked me about anything else. Not my business, not my friends, not my dogs, not where I'm traveling to next. Just when am I getting a boyfriend and getting married? Like it's the ultimate goal in life. Now, I know it's a generational thing. She comes from an era where for women, that was probably the only thing that kind of mattered. But it's just not my nan. It's every family gathering. You sort out your career, check. You meet someone special, check. And then all of a sudden, every barbecue and every catch up with the family or in-laws turns into a grilling session about when you're going to get married. And here's the crazy bit. Most of these people putting the pressure on you are divorced themselves, or they've never been married, or they're sitting there miserable with their face in their pasta, dreaming about a better life. So why the fuck do we do this to each other? We know the stats. The divorce rate's 50% and most couples don't make it. You literally have a higher chance of climbing to the top of Mount Everest than staying married. Climbing the tallest mountain in the world in minus 40 degrees with people dying all around you has better odds than your wedding lasting. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not anti-marriage, but I am anti-settling. And I know heaps of people that have settled. They picked their partner because they were in a hurry to have kids, or they thought that this person will do, or that they might be a good mother to their children. And then years later, they're divorced because they realize they have nothing in common outside of the kids. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, no stress, I'll just go around a second time. Well, I've got bad news for you. The stats actually get way worse. People who marry a second time are 60% more likely to get a divorce. So what's the alternative? Well, marry the right one. Marry someone who supports your dreams, respects you, is loyal to you, loves you unconditionally, and someone whose company you genuinely enjoy. You might share the same big goal of having a family one day, but don't make that the only thing that you have in common. Having the same values is one of the most important things to look for in a partner. So find someone who can communicate with you when times get tough, because they will. And if your partner can't open up to you or talk to you, that relationship is going to be a hard slog. Now, I know you're probably sitting there thinking, well, what does an unmarried 50-year-old know about relationships? Well, I know a lot more than most 20, 30 and 40-year-olds because I've lived it. I've been in relationships and I've seen my friends' marriages fall apart right in front of me. I've watched my own parents go through a divorce 7 years ago, and I watch, I learn, and I observe. And if you're going to take marriage seriously and commit to death do you part, make sure it's with someone you respect and someone that you're actually attracted to and you genuinely like the person for who they are today, not who they might become later on down the track, who they are right now. Now, I have made this mistake. I've convinced myself to stay in a relationship because of someone's potential, not who they were right then, but who they might become. The way I see relationships now is if it is not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. So let's move on to the next biggest fallacy, having kids. Society, or our grandkid hungry parents, tell us to have kids because that's the next step after marriage. We get told having children gives you purpose and meaning in life, a legacy, someone to look after you when you're too old and you can't wipe your own bum. And while some of those reasons are valid, there is a payoff that people don't tell you about. According to a recent study, parents are 65% more likely to report high stress levels versus people without kids. The top doctor in the US had to literally issue a public health warning about how stressed parents are. That's how bad it is. And it's not just the more stress, it's also a lighter wallet. The average cost of raising a child in Australia is well over $300,000 from birth to 17 years old. Now, to put that in perspective, if you took that 300 grand and invested it into their S&P over 17 years, your returns would be around 2.5 million. Or if you put it into a higher risk investment like Bitcoin, you'd end up with $60 million in your back pocket. So instead of a hormonal 17-year-old screaming at you because you lost one of her fluffy socks in the wash, you'd be sitting on millions of dollars and probably a few less grey hairs. Now, I hear you saying, Sam, kids aren't about money. They're about happiness and unconditional love. And look, fair enough. So let's look into that as well. In Australia and the US, parents reported that they were 12% less happy than people without kids. The reason why is because we don't have proper paid parental leave and childcare is insanely expensive. And the mental load on mums is brutal. They literally juggle full-time work, kids, lunch boxes, cleaning and everything else. No wonder they're unhappy. But you can be unhappy and still have very high levels of meaning and purpose. According to one of the world top happiness researchers at Harvard, parents might experience more day-to-day stress and less happiness, but they do report more meaning and purpose in their lives than people with no kids. So it is definitely something to consider. Now, I'm not saying don't have kids. I'm saying make sure you're choosing it because you actually want them and you understand the trade-offs and the fact you're giving up your life in some sense to give life. So my point is don't have kids because society tells you that's the next thing to do after marriage. And don't have kids because your sister's having them or your friends are having them. Have them because you truly want kids. So moving on to the final lie that we get told, get a mortgage. Now, I hear you saying, Sam, but property is the best investment in the world. My parents bought the house for 80 grand in the 80s and now it's worth $2 million. And fair enough. Let's look at that. Core Logic data shows Australian property values have grown around 70 to 80% on average over the last 10 years. Here on the Gold Coast and in Brisbane, it's been even bigger. Some properties have more than doubled. So if you bought a $500,000 home a decade ago, you're probably sitting on $400,000 to $600,000 in gains. But here is the thing nobody talks about. That gain is a paper number. It's not what actually lands in your back pocket because property comes with a long list of costs that people conveniently forget to mention. So let's run through what those costs are. First, you've got stamp duty. So when you buy, you pay 4 to 5% upfront. On a $700,000 home, that's around 30 grand, gone before you've even unpacked anything. The next thing is mortgage interest. This is the silent killer. At 6% on a $600,000 loan, you're paying around 36 grand a year just in interest. Over 10 years, that can easily add up to over 300,000. And council rates, anywhere from 1,500 to 3 grand a year. Water rates, another grand or so. Building and contents insurance, anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000. Maintenance, well, the rule of thumb is about 1% of the property's value. So on a $700,000 home, that could be about 7 grand a year just on hot water systems or painting the roof or the dishwasher just carked it, or, the fence, your neighbor's dog just destroyed it. Then you've got body corporate. If you live in an apartment or a townhouse, you can be slugged anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 or more a year. And then don't forget about land tax. If that's an investment property, hello, extra big bill. And then capital gains tax when you decide to sell it. Plus all the selling costs, agent commission, 2 to 3%, conveyancing, marketing, all of that's easily another 25 to 35 grand gone. If you add all of that up, and that beautiful $400,000 gain on paper will shrink down to 100 grand, maybe 200 grand if you're lucky. Now, it is still a positive return, but it's a lot less than the dinner party version that you just shared last week. So here's the thing. I'm not telling you not to buy property. Property can be amazing, and I own property and I have a mortgage myself. Over a long enough time frame, property has built more middle-class wealth in Australia than almost anything else. But you need to go into it with your eyes wide open. A mortgage is not a magic wealth machine. It's a 30-year commitment with a serious list of hidden costs that nobody mentions when you're signing the contract and popping the bottle of Verve on settlement. Now, here's a bit I'm going to call out. Most Australians are getting mortgages that they can't afford. According to a recent survey, 44% of Australian households with mortgages are now spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. That is the official threshold for mortgage stress. Now let that sink in. Nearly 1 in 2 mortgage holders in this country are financially stressed every single month. And it gets worse. If you're a first home buyer in Sydney, first home buyers are spending 57% of their combined income just on mortgage repayments. In Brisbane, it's about 46%. And now every single capital city except Darwin was in mortgage stress territory. The problem has spread across the whole country, and it's not getting better. The average time to save for a deposit in Australia has now blown out to 10 years. 10 years just to scrape together enough money for the deposit, and then another 25 to 30 years to pay the mortgage off. That is essentially your entire working life. So let's put that in real numbers for you. If you earn 150K a year, 30% of that is 45 grand going straight into your mortgage. And after tax, that is basically half of your take-home pay, just to keep a roof over your head. No holidays, no car, no buffer if you lose your job, no fun. So mortgages, kids, and marriages. Now, none of these 3 things are bad on their own. The lie is that you have to do all 3 in that order by a certain age or you've failed at life. You haven't. People assume that if they do these things just because society tells them to, just because everybody else is doing it, that they'll have a happier and successful life. But it's just not true. Happiness and success don't come from home ownership. They don't come from a marriage certificate. And they sure as hell don't come from pushing a watermelon out of your vagina. Your life is a choice. So make sure you're actually choosing it for yourself and not just sleepwalking into the next scene because that's what society told you to do. Fuck society's norms. Create your own version of what a happy life looks like. And if you don't know what that looks like, sit down and really think about it. Look, for me personally, up until I was in my early 30s, I always thought I wanted to get married and have kids. And then I actually did the work on myself when I turned 31 and I realized I don't think I want to be a mum. I don't think I want to sacrifice my life to give someone else a life. Freedom is my biggest driver. I love freedom. I'm a selfish bitch and I didn't want to give away my life for anybody. Now, I'm not saying having kids is wrong and it means that you don't have any freedom. It's just wrong for me. I've got plenty of friends who are amazing mums because that is exactly what they were born to do. That's all they have ever wanted, to be a mum. And that is a beautiful thing. But it's not for me, and that's okay. You just need to get to know who you are and what you actually want in this lifetime. Not get told what to do because your mum wants a grandchild by the time you're 35. Honestly, my dad actually said to me recently, he's like, I'd love some grandkids. And I've responded, well, go and find yourself a nice girl in the Philippines and you can have your own. Like, don't come looking at my uterus. And funnily enough, he hasn't asked me again since. Success is not a checklist. Success is having the freedom to choose, the freedom to say no, the freedom to walk away from anything in your life that isn't a fuck yes. So to recap, marriage, half of them end in divorce. Second time round, even worse. So just make sure you marry someone you actually respect, not someone you settled for because the clock was ticking. Kids, over $300K a pop just to get them to 17. Parents are 65% more likely to be stressed than people without kids. They report 12% less day-to-day happiness. So if you're going to have them, amazing, but just genuinely want them for yourself. And please don't have them because your dad asked you 100 times for grandkids. And finally, a mortgage. 44% of Aussies with one are in mortgage stress. So buy a home you can afford comfortably with a buffer, or just rent and invest the difference. Just don't sleepwalk into a 30-year commitment because that's what you're supposed to do. And remember, you only get one shot at this life, so don't waste it ticking someone else's boxes. So that is today's episode. The biggest lies we get told: marriage, kids, and mortgages. Hit the subscribe button below and I'll see you back here for the next episode in a couple of weeks. See ya.